Had a big head, rounded ears, 6 feet in the body maybe, with a very, very long tail, very muscular build. As it was walking, it was still looking at me, and that's when I really panicked.
It looked at me and thought, oh, there's a human there, I'm not scared. You say, well, I've seen this big cat, and some people just flatly refuse. They think that Britain's such a sweet little island, we shouldn't have predators that size.
I heard this growl behind me, nothing like a dog's growl, and just like anything else in life, you're sat on your own there. I don't care who you are, how brave you are, something like that will put the shivers up your spine.
As she was walking, before the cub came out, she flicked this tail. She literally flicked it in the air, and I simply could not believe what I was seeing. It was the most extraordinary feeling.
It threw its head back, he said, and it made this sort of round.
But when you actually realise that there are big cats living in Britain, it changes everything.
Welcome to Big Cat Conversations. We speak directly to people who've encountered one of Britain's big cats. We also discuss the bigger picture. Why are unofficial big cats being seen, and could these cats even be naturalising without us knowing? If you've had a big cat encounter in Britain and would like to discuss it, email me at rick@bigcatconversations.com. You can find other episodes on the website bigcatconversations.com. I'm Rick Minter, and thanks for joining me. Hello everyone, and welcome to the show. And this show is going to be a bit different from some of the others you've heard so far, because we've just got the one guest, so we're going to have an extended conversation, and we're sitting with Frank Tunbridge, who's based in Gloucester, not far from me. And Frank is somebody who takes a lot of reports like I do, so I swap notes with him regularly. But today we're going to swap notes with him and get his perspective. He's the guest, so we're going to get his reports, his reflections on reports he's received over the years, but also some of his own sightings. He's had sightings himself, which of course really helps the understanding of the subject. Now, if you Google Frank Tunbridge, Gloucester, Frank Tunbridge, big cat sightings, you'll come up very quickly with a number of entries on the web with Frank in local papers. He's often used as somebody who comments on sightings reports to the press, nationally and especially locally here in Gloucestershire. The terms of labelling used for Frank are very interesting, and I experienced this myself. The media never know whether to call you an expert or an enthusiast, which sounds a bit patronising, or a tracker or whatever. So in a way, bits of all of those are correct, but none of them seems right. But I'm just going to introduce him as somebody who's got bags of experience of speaking to witnesses and understanding and appreciating the emotions they receive when they experience a big cat. So that's what we're going to try and really probe in this next hour with Frank. But before we get some of his reflections on those big cat encounters, we want to hear one or two of his own. So Frank, thanks for coming on the show. And could you maybe think about one of the most memorable encounters you've had yourself and take us through it?
Well, over the years, really, I haven't had all that many because these cats are so elusive, so secretive. And they're generally dusk and dawn creatures, late afternoon as well, generally. But I've seen a couple crossing the road. I've had a couple of close-up encounters. The best idea to judge these is the sort of the movement and behaviour of the creature, which shows that it's a wild animal and not a domestic cat. And you can tell by their movement, and exactly like a fox or a badger or any wild animal in this country, it's their movement, the behaviour, and their reaction to people nearby. I saw one crossing the road some years ago when I was coming back late one evening from Stroud, and this was on going towards Painswick. And funnily enough, ironically, there's a place called Cat Brain Quarry, which is just down the road. And it's about 10:30, 11 at night, about 40 yards ahead. Suddenly, this big, quite chunky black cat came out, casually crossed the road at a trot, got to the bank, and in one sort of bound, up in the bank and gone. Now, you could tell by its movement, it has been feral, wild, quite a while, I should think, living out there quite successfully, which they all do, due to the amount of wildlife and the prey species that they've got at hand. So encounters like this are quite good. You don't often come across them. You just have to be in the right place at the right time, which I was, and like many people are. If I'd have been 15, 20 seconds before, I would have missed it, and the same afterwards. So it's ironical that these occurrences happen just where you are at the right time. That was quite a good one. Another particular one is where I sat out to watch for a big cat after a report. What I did to attract it, I put some bait out. Even if they're not hungry, the smell of it or the look of it must attract them, and they come to investigate. And this one was quite a good one. I could see it in quite detail. Now, contrary to popular belief and opinion, a lot of these big cats are not that big. They're not the size of large leopards or big, massive 300-pound pumas a lot of the time. Most of the sightings that I get and I come across, generally sort of Labrador, maybe even small German Shepherd dog size. And they're quite slim and athletic and fit-looking, which they would be because they're living wild, unlike leopards, pumas and other bigger cats that you see in zoos, which are almost like couch potatoes. And they just get fed, they sit there, laze around all day, they lose all their muscle mass, this sort of thing. And actually, most probably they're not very sharp in their brain power either because they don't have to use it. So you can tell a wild animal straight away. Now, this encounter I was just going to tell you about, where I sat out the other side of Stroud, and a lady I know had actually seen this big cat on a couple of occasions coming down this field. So I thought, okay, so I sat up there about 7 o'clock. It's September, I believe it was. So it's just getting dark around about 7:45. So I sat up there and I put some old army scrim I had over me as a camouflage sort of thing, and I just sat there and waited. I heard there's a little copse on the left. So what I did, I had a rabbit which is about a week old and smelt quite a bit, and a dead seagull which I found on the road. So I put them in the actual place where this cat had been seen. Didn't think I'd get anything or see anything, but anyway, I sat there and waited, dead quiet. Now that's the main thing about watching wildlife, not only big cats, any wildlife. You've got to stay still and quiet. Movement, sound is the main thing. And also you've got to note the wind as well, because wild animals live on the wind. They smell you. So you have to make sure the wind's blowing in the right direction if you can. So anyway, I sat, waited, and all of a sudden some foxes started this whickering noise which they make, when they're quite nervous or whatever, yapping and whickering sound. I looked out and I had a camcorder with me, but it wasn't a night vision one. I didn't have one at the time, and I had a bit large pair of binoculars. So I looked at the foxes through binoculars. These foxes making a hell of a racket. I thought, well, something's frightened them, and I could see them coming up, looking, going back, coming up, and they were looking at the bait. They obviously wanted to go for this rabbit and the seagull, but something was putting them off. It wasn't dark then, just enough light maybe for the camcorder to use. So I was hoping it appeared. Then suddenly, on the left where I was sitting, there's a copse of trees going down towards the road. Anyway, all of a sudden, there's a hell of a racket. All the crows and were harassing something and making a hell of a noise in the actual copse up there. I thought it's obviously some predator has disturbed them. So I sat there and watched, and I kept my eyes on the bait. Lo and behold, suddenly, this cat, I should say slim, small Labrador size, jet black, came in one movement. What it had been doing, it had come up from where the foxes were making this racket on the right, and they were obviously following it, but frightened of it, keeping their distance, and letting everyone else know that there's a big predator there. And it worked its way from that side using one of the contours of the hill, which they do. They use every feature, which is obviously wild animals do, not to be seen. And then suddenly, I think it realised I was there. Dashed across, I should say, 3 seconds, bent down, grabbed the rabbit, and just with 2 or 3 more sort of strides, it's back in the wood and gone. But the strange part about it was, I can see it now, The actual gait it used was not a running or leaping gait, which they do generally when they're going across a road. This was almost like a cantering sort of movement, like a horse does. The two front legs were coming down sort of together. It's very like a cantering sort of gait, very casual. And in one movement, it swept down, took the rabbit out. That is quite an amazing sight to see that. Of course, too late to take a photograph. It's just getting too dark. So I continued to sit there and wait. And I thought, well, I might see it again, I might not. Anyway, nothing. It all suddenly went quiet then. Until I heard this growl behind me. Now, this is, by that time, maybe about 11:30 at night. And nothing like a dog's growl. A sort of ominous sort of a warning growl. A sort of like that. And just like anything else in life, you're sat on your own there. I don't care who you are, how brave you are, whatever you are. Something like that will put the shivers up your spine. And you can feel the hair on the back of your neck. Right. I knew what it was. It's this cat going round the back, knew I was there, and was giving me a sort of warning, say, look, get out of my territory sort of thing. So I'm not going to move. So I just left it. And then next thing I heard was once again these foxes down the bottom. It's obviously gone down there, took the rabbit with it, or I don't know, started their racket up again. So you could follow, and this is the best way, follow predators by other wildlife, by the calls they make, the crows, magpies, foxes, anything like that. So that's quite an amazing experience, actually. That must be the best one I've had.
Splendid. How far away do you think the cat was from you when it gave you that warning growl?
Well, considering where I sat, I would say 5 yards.
That close? And you didn't hear it behind you? You didn't hear any movement?
No, you don't. They're so secretive, stealthy. Cats are cats. They got sort of padded velvet paws, and so that's how nature's made them.
Yeah, that's great timing, Frank, because we're in an earlier episode speaking to Corin, and so people can, if they haven't heard that, and this is the cat that's seen several times and filmed once by Corin in the Stroud area, and I know you helped with that whole saga. And so we'll hear directly from Corin in one of the earlier episodes. So this is a sort of little bit of supplementary experience from that whole saga. Great, thank you very much, Frank. So we'll now go on to the reports that you have received over the years and sort of reflect on some of the highlights. But before we do that, can we just go back to the nature of the cats? You said they walk like they've got velvet gloves and they've got this stealthy mode. In each episode, we have a word of the week. The word for this episode is one that you introduced to me, and I've always thought how useful it is to start thinking about the nature of the cats, and that is digitigrade.
Yeah.
Now, can you can save me 2 minutes by explaining it yourself, if you wouldn't mind?
Well, basically, in mammals, digitigrade and plantigrade, that's the two main ones. You get deer, which are ungrade.
Yeah.
But I won't go for deer, hoofed mammals. But the two, amongst the carnivorous animals, or omnivorous as well, you get the digitigrade, and that means walking on their toes, not on the flat.
And not on the heel.
Not on the heel.
Yeah, like we do.
Yeah, like we do. We're plantigrade, humans. The great apes are plantigrade. Give you another example. Bears are plantigrade. Wolverines and all the weasel families are plantigrade. Okay, badgers especially are plantigrade. Of course, they haven't got the speed like an animal that walks on its toes. A wolf, fast runner, a cheetah, all the big cats. They walk on their toes. You see. Even though they've got a back pad that comes down, the actual elbow is much higher up, you see. Right?
And of course, if you're an ambush predator, that you're on your tiptoes
all
basically.
The time. Yeah. And of course, they use it for the speed, the less contact with the ground. I mean, you never see a badger doing sort of like 40 miles an hour. Simple as that. Or bears are quite lumbering, even though they can go quite fast. So plantigrade is the whole sole and the digits going down flat. Imagine our foot, and then imagine us humans walking or tiptoeing on our toes, like a ballet dancer or something like this, you see, or sprinters running on their toes and get much more speed out of it because there's less contact with the ground. And so cats are digitigrade as well. But as opposed to the dog family, canines, cats, felids, are they walk their way through life most of the time. They don't exert energy unless they have to.
Sure.
Whereas dogs run their prey down, wolves, dogs, other animals run their prey down generally, mostly, by their stamina. By just running it miles and miles. The animal gets exhausted and they pull it down, generally as a pack. Whereas cats use their quietness, their pads, almost. If you've got a domestic cat, you only got to, when it's relaxed, open its pad, look at its paw, and press the hind pad of it. And it's almost like pressing a jelly. It's very supple, and it jumps back into shape, and so it's quiet when it puts it down. If you've got a dog, you only got to look at your dog's pads, and they're rough, very rough and hard, because the dog's running all the time on hard ground. If it had soft pads like a cat, it'll rip them to pieces. So the nature of the animal is matched to its environment, the prey, and the mode of hunting. You see what I mean?
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. And it's also noticeable looking at a cat's foot and a cat's pads. The pads are so well tucked within the bigger foot. It's like the foot is almost a third bigger than the scope of the pads. And I find a lot of witnesses mention how they sort of comment like it was padding, or it seemed to have big feet, or proportionately big feet, which is correct. That's how cats are.
It is. One way of looking at it, because not only big cats, I've been studying wildlife since I was a child, and I find it so fascinating. And you have to study one animal, a carnivore, you have to study, to understand it, you have to study the carnivore's prey, and vice versa. If you're looking at the prey species, you have to look at the predator. And you find with the cats, they got this very stealthy mode going along on their pads. And within their pad, you've got that the back pad, and then of course the claws are sheath, because if they had them out all the time, obviously they do use them pulling down prey, of course, to hold the prey, scratching trees, or when they're coming down from a tree, they do use it. Even in uneven ground, you sometimes come across claw marks, and a lot of people dismiss it and say, "Oh, that's a dog," because we all know dogs walk with their claws out. But no, the way to do it, which I always done, apart from looking at the pads itself, they're very almost like Stanley knives going into the ground. Razor sharp. Dogs don't get pads on. Dogs' claws are very blunt, and no need to be sharp at all. They don't have to hold their prey when they're pulling it down. And also the deepness of them. Dogs' claws only just touch the ground, maybe going a centimetre, if that. If I find a pad mark when I'm out looking, which I think is very suspect, what I do is get a very thin blade of grass or straw, which is nearby, and gently drop it into the claw mark and see how far down it goes. And then you can pull it out, and if it's like over 3 centimetres more, it's got to be a cat which made that mark, you see. The other thing, I could go on quite a lot about.
Like a pinprick drawn into the ground.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And of course there's other features, like most cats have got a leading toe. They've got a trilobe rear pad, and this distinguishes from dogs. But overall, the digits, the 4 digits they got on there, the 5th one is like the dew claw, which doesn't make any effect, it's up higher. The 4 digits on the front are generally much wider spread, and they're much more mobile. Once again, I refer to a domestic cat and a dog, which is a good example, because unless you go to a big cat and try to look at its paws, which you won't, you look at your domestic cat. For all cats, are the same virtually in their behaviour and their structure, from a tabby up to a tiger. If you look at a domestic cat's paws, and we had a cat some years, a lovely cat, and it used to sleep on our bed, and it used to he used to wrap himself around my forearm, and he used to get a hold of my thumb, and he used to and it felt like a monkey. It's so mobile. The pads are, the digits, so mobile. The dogs don't do that. Dogs are static on there. They're not that mobile, you see. You don't need to, or you can use it for his running.
And you make the point that you shouldn't dismiss a footprint impression if it has potential claw marks, because they will, and certainly older cats can have their claws displayed sometimes.
Well, yeah, maybe, but what happens 90% of the time, cats will, because it's the tools of the trade, you think about it, they've got to be razor sharp to hang on to and pull down prey. If they were blunt, Well, cheetahs don't really need the claws. They generally trip them up and pull them down, as you see on these wildlife programs.
While we're on this sort of behaviour of the cats, there's one other bit of background info that I wouldn't mind you spending a couple of minutes on, and that is Jim Corbett's books. I mean, it's always nice to recommend literature and reading for people, and I know you and other people like to promote Jim Corbett's work. Now, there are some viewpoints that he might have exaggerated and embellished some of his reports, but his books were sort of in the 1940s, 1950s.
40s, 50s.
From India, about leopards and tigers.
Yeah, man-eaters. He was employed by the government and sent there because they had such a spate of man-eating tigers and leopards. And he's very good. He was brought up in India, so he knew the jungle right from the very start. It's no good knowing, just concentrating on one species, as I said. You have to know the calls, the sounds, the distress notes, the warning notes, the birds, of everything.
Yeah, all the ecosystem.
All the whole lot. And then it all match in. Then you can know, you can actually see, you can paint a picture in your mind what's up ahead without even seeing it before you get there. You see, and that's what Corbett used to do. It's the monkeys and the birds and all these different animals. And he was very good. And the patience, he would wait. And he said he pitted his wits against some of these man-eating leopards, especially. He said the leopards are much more clever than tigers. He said the leopard was, as it was that much smaller, it could go into places tigers wouldn't go. Just like you do nowadays, you get urban leopards in India and Mumbai, etc., as we know, and come in and take the dogs, and people don't even know they're there until they find them on camera, get them on camera, or see the results, their dog or their cats or their goats disappeared, this sort of thing. And at one point, to emphasise how stealthy, secretive, quiet, and how even the animal seems to be like a spirit. The native people said to him, "You would never catch it. This animal is a spirit. It's not real. It's not physical." And so he thought to himself, he spent months trying to get this leopard. It avoided traps. It avoided poison baits. It avoided him waiting up for it. He said how it walked over. He put down a load of dead, dry leaves, he said, and he heard a lizard scuttle across these leaves. And next thing, he heard the leopard at the bottom of the tree. How the leopard got across those leaves without making a sound. So it shows you how skillful and stealthy they are. And he admired, and Corbett respected. He never shot an animal, and I admire him for this. He never shot a leopard or a tiger unless it was a man-eater or an affirmed stop killer. Normal leopards and tigers, he said, they don't mean me any harm. Let them carry on. They're just doing it naturally. I've been reading Corbett's books since I was 17, and I can still read them again. And they're very exciting to me, almost like you're there with him at the time, you see. As Corbett would say, he felt great sorrow at shooting a tiger or a leopard, because they're so beautiful animals. But he had no choice because they're killing children in the villages, this sort of thing. Yeah. But I think nowadays it's the opposite. I think they do tend to, in India and other parts, if there is a leopard, and it's not a proven man-eater, they do harass it, and
in some places,
do. Whereas,
I think it's. From what I've read and heard, it is different in different locations.
Different locations. You have to confirm which one is which. Just like you do nowadays.
Distinguish the badly behaved one, whatever, right, the one that's putting people at risk.
So I'd recommend Corbett's books.
And there is a compendium to start with. You could rather than buy different ones. There's a compendium one anyway. Temple Tigers is one, isn't it? The Man-Eaters of Kuman.
The Man-Eater of Kuman. That's a very good one. You don't normally get healthy tigers or leopards. Not normally. Now and again you do, but not normally. Turn into man-eaters. Generally, because they've got a broken canine, they can't pull down their prey. They're old, arthritic. They just can't pull down their prey anymore, and so then they take to killing man.
And it's actually remarkable how resourceful some of the older ones or injured ones become. Here, I mean, we've heard people talking about them fishing in their gardens, going for koi carp in their gardens, and them looking like they're arthritic, and people feeling pity for them and feeling, okay, my koi carp stock are expensive, but it's a fascinating thing to observe. And so they adapt, it seems, once they have some of their powers and skills reduced by their age. And
that's right. Just like we got to adapt as we get older.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, I can't do now what I did when I was 35.
Sure.
I could climb mountains, go down cliffs and all sorts. But because you just can't do it as you get older. Physically, you can't do it. Mentally, you're the same. You want to do it.
Yeah, and some of those Cotswold slopes, the gradients are pretty good.
That's right. But funny you were saying that about over here, because I always remember one instance talking about big cats and hooking out fish and koi. There's one instance in a school. I can't remember exactly the school was now. But it's in mid-afternoon, and they had one of these raised ponds in the actual sort of forecourt or in the middle of the playground of the school. And suddenly, one of the children said to the teacher, "Please, ma'am, there's a big tiger-like animal over there, and it's looking at our fish." He said, "Oh, don't be silly." And all of a sudden, they all turned around, and he saw this big cat trying to hook out the fish. I think it's a particularly hot summer, like it is now at the moment. And of course, this is what happens. It gets attracted to other sources. And of course, they all saw it. The whole class saw this big cat.
Blatantly which
trying
occurs sometimes, yeah.
Now, this, funnily enough, this is a very good report, another report, just come to mind. Because all this I store in my mind, like a file, like a computer, and I just call on it. Obviously, I've got a book of all the reports I can refer to, but like anything else in life, one thing would trigger another thing off. And this, I just thought of this. Now, this was quite fantastic. This is only last year when we had a very, very hot spell like it is right now. I think it was last April. I can't remember. We had a very hot spell. Everything dried up.
Yeah, no, it was July, August last summer. Yeah, summer 2018.
It is extremely
6 to 8 weeks of
6 to 8. It's extremely hot weather. Ponds are drying up and everything. So animals have to obviously look for water, and B, look for food, you see. And of course, with all animals, deer and the prey species will go looking for water as well. And if that's the cats, got to find their prey, and so their followers suit. There's one particular man, and this is most probably a very amazing sighting. He lives in Barnwood, part of Gloucester.
Yeah, so in a residential area, halfway into the in from the suburbs towards the centre. Yeah.
Towards the centre. Right next to a very big park, Arboretum. He lived in a cul-de-sac in this close. He said in front of his house there was because he lived right in the end where the cul-de-sac turned round and come back out. And in the centre of it is a large grassed area with 2 or 3 lime trees. And they're in full flower, full leaf at that time, of course. And he had yellow street lights like all these places have. And he said he looked out his window before he went to bed at 11 o'clock. And he said he couldn't believe it. He said, sat by the tree was a big black cat. I said, how big? Very big, he said. He described it. Most people say the size of a Labrador, German Shepherd. Now this is one, I suppose in a way, this is good comparison, because people all know German Shepherd size, Labrador size. But by making this comparison with a dog, it sometimes puts in people's mind, oh, it's a dog you saw. No, I'm just comparing it to a dog. Now, he compared it to a Labradoodle. So he knows the size of a Labradoodle. It's quite big. He watched it. Unfortunately, this guy, elderly guy, and he hasn't got a mobile phone. He's got a camera, and he looked out the window and he just sat there, and it was sat up on its haunches, looking at this far house in the corner, like cats do, so patiently. You can imagine a cat, a typical sort of classic example of a domestic cat, sitting for an hour or more beside a mouse hole, waiting for the mouse to come out. It's a very similar situation, although it's 4 or 5 times the size. So it sat there watching. He said, I looked at it. I thought, I don't believe what I'm seeing. He said, I'll go and get my camera. So he went back. The camera, no batteries in it. So he didn't have much. So he went back and he watched this big cat for an hour. An hour. I can't believe it. It's quite amazing. And it just sat there. And then it obviously got tired of sitting up. And it went down in a crouch, still watching this corner, and up again. He said, then from a laurel bush nearby, because I went up and investigated all this and put a couple of cameras up there. I always investigate and try and find any signs of big cats where people have said they've seen them. If necessary, I put a camera out there, hoping it'll come back. 9 times out of 10, it doesn't come back. Or if it does come back, it don't go past the camera. Simple as that. He said a fox came out from the undergrowth, from the laurel bush nearby. The fox looked at it and thought, what's that? You could see, he said, you could see the questioning of the fox. He said it gradually walked towards it. And he said it got about sort of a yard from the cat, the fox. And the cat just turns round. The fox leapt out of its skin and shot off like that. Obviously, the fox had never seen one before. And sort of realised it was a big cat, could kill it. Anyway, he said the cat continued. And he thinks, and I think most probably right, because what we found during hot spells like that, they come in looking for food around towns, just like urban foxes, where it's easy food. They go scavenging. And domestic cats, we know these big cats take and eat, or take domestic cats. And the guy in the corner had a cat flap, and he knows he's got 2 domestic cats. I think it realised, and it's waiting for those cats to come out.
From a neighbour's house.
From a neighbour's house.
Yeah.
What's happened eventually? He said, well, it moved behind the tree a bit more. So I couldn't get a very good view of it. So I thought, I'll come downstairs. So he said, I come downstairs, walked out, he said, and the security light come on. He said, it heard me, turned round. It was walking towards me when I opened the door. It was obviously got fed up waiting for the cats and thought I'd try elsewhere. And they're walking towards me, he said. I opened the door, the cat stopped, I stopped, so I thought, wow. And the cat, he said, snarled at me, he said. A silent snarl. He said, you could see its white teeth, yellow eyes. He said, and it casually walked off under the street lamp and headed for this arboretum. Fantastic experience.
Yeah.
Fantastic experience like that.
Yeah. Didn't this guy tell his neighbour, who then didn't believe him?
Oh, he told his neighbour. Yeah, of course, no neighbours just don't believe it. I mean, my neighbour here didn't believe, first of all, that we had foxes in our garden, urban foxes. I mean, it's crazy. Some people just don't want to believe, or they're not animal people, as I say.
Yeah, they're just watching telly all the time.
Yeah, you've got to be.
Yeah.
You've got to be an animal person to realise, you've got to.
Yeah, what can go on?
What can go on?
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that, Frank, because I wanted to touch on the urban situation. That is a classic example of how they can be close to people's houses and around gardens without us really knowing.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
it's only dogs barking are going to notice them and alert people, just like happens in Mumbai and places, urban places in Africa. So that is leopard-like behaviour and puma-like behaviour.
Yeah.
A puma is very similar to a leopard, really, in form.
Well, it is and it isn't. Leopards have got generally a much longer, quite a bit longer muzzle most of the time. And of course, leopards are big cats as such. They come under the Panthera genus. You see, Panthera pardus is the actual scientific name. So they're all under the Panthera, like Panthera leo, the lion, and the tigris. All the big cats, whereas pumas are actually a large, small cat, as they say.
Felis.
Because it's felis.
Yeah. Could you do the noises of them, Frank? The main sort of calls that I know you sometimes get these reported, but could you do a sort of leopard-like one first?
Well, I've only ever heard this once, actually, and that was when I sat out trying to take some video footage of some badgers in this guy's garden. And he had a light, he leaves the light on all the time, so the badgers weren't fazed by the light. So I could record them on my camcorder. I was waiting, and it got to midnight. This is in Stroud again. Stroud's a marvellous area for all sorts of wildlife, actually. Yeah, deer, badgers, foxes, big cats, you name it. All
for people who don't know it, it's got sort of 5 really deep valleys that sort of coalesce around the town. But it's steep valleys and hills and Cotswolds,
and a few woodlands,
slope sides. Yeah.
And anyway, I sat out there, and I remember it chiming midnight. I thought, well, the badger had come out, and I got a bit of footage when they went back in again. I thought, I'll just give it a try. I thought, I'll make a noise of a leopard, because it's dead quiet, just see what comes back. I didn't expect anything at all, right? And I made this, like a leopard makes this sort of, that sort of a coughing noise. Like a horse saw, like an old rip saw, when you're sawing. And they'll do that, you see. That will determine I'm here, for other leopards to hear, and also, don't come into my territory, this sort of thing. So I did that, and I waited, and I didn't hear anything. So I did it once again, and I thought, then all of a sudden I heard it in the distance. it travelled, because I was quite high up, you see, and it must have travelled across the valley because it was dead quiet. And I heard this distant sort of like that in the distance. I was amazed. So I thought, well, that proves a point that these cats are out there.
Very good.
Yeah. So by calling, and Corbett used to do this. Corbett could call tigers.
It's vibrations that are using as well, isn't it? The infrasound sort of vibrations.
Yeah, but they were so good.
Up.
They could call. I can't do tigers very well, but tiger was a sort of a moaning sort of.
We ought to emphasise not heard in Britain.
No. Yeah, so that was that sound. Then there's another, which takes me on to the next part of the subject.
We better do puma, yeah.
And I think this all correlates back to the fact that many people years ago, pop stars, etc., kept big cats in Stroud area and released them. And I think this is why you've still got a nucleus of big cats there. Yeah. But anyway, this guy, same sort of thing. He said he got up early in the morning, might have got a pee or something early in the morning, got up, and it's moonlight, and he looked out the window. And the way these people describe this, you see, they're not fantasising, they're just telling you what they saw. And these are genuine people. These are not people out to sort of fool anyone or try and sort of make any money out of it all. These are just, they're interested in seeing something they don't expect to see in the British countryside, which none of us do. And he said he went out and looked across and he saw, bottom of his garden, he saw this puma. And he described it just like a puma. With thick rope-like tail, he said, sort of in the moonlight, sort of greyish colour. He said he had a round sort of head, which pumas got a roundish face, almost like a domestic cat sort of face they got. He said, and it ignored, it didn't even know he was there, it was looking out the window. And he said, it threw its head back, he said, and it made this sort of, let me see if I can do it, sort of, like that. Sort of a bit more higher now, more slowly, like that, which pumas do. And normally it's the female pumas that do it, calling them out. And that was about Christmas time, just after then. And it was calling across the... And it fascinated this guy, he couldn't believe it. He described it in such great detail. And of course he bought 2 cameras, and he put these cameras in the garden. And I always say, let me know, never heard anything more. It's just in one place at the right time. So that is a really fantastic puma sighting and calling. But they obviously exist in the same territory. Now, the strange part about it...
You mean the different types of cats, different colour cats, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, they do abroad. I mean, tigers and leopards live in India, but they come out and avoid each other because a tiger will kill a leopard. I mean, a larger predator will always kill a smaller predator because it's a competition for food.
But they'll be wary of injury as well sometimes.
Oh, yeah, but they like a wolf will always kill a coyote, or a fox if you can get hold of it. And tigers always kill leopards. And lions will kill leopards, and cheetahs. This is why they have to abandon their prey, because the leopards or any other, even hyenas, will take it off them. And they obviously avoid each other. But the strange part about it is there is one theory which could be possible, even though scientists dispute it, so it's not possible. And I think it can be, because nature finds a way. If there's leopards and pumas out there, there's not enough nucleus of one particular species. One will mate with the other one. And obviously they're both cat species, although one's smaller cat, one's a larger cat. They're both mates, and this has been this mating has been tried in captivity, and it works. And the animal comes out. It's called a pumapard, and you can look this up on the internet. And you'll see a picture of a pumapard, and believe it or not, they come out much smaller. If you cross too large, you think they're going to get a large one, but a pumapard is quite smaller. But then people say they're fertile. Well, maybe not, because over the generations...
Or if they're bred on, they wouldn't have the sort of bone structure, and they'd have inbred weaknesses to survive and
But what happens,
thrive.
you see, eventually, if you have a void in nature of a prey species, whatever, it has to be filled. That's the way it is. And something will fill that, you see. Like when all the wolves were taken out from Yellowstone Park. The coyotes took over, but now bring wolves back to keep the coyotes down, because you've got to have this balance. And I think there is quite a lot of hybrid cats out there. I personally do, because 80% of all the sightings, not only locally, I get it from Devon and Cornwall, Scotland, and all around London, Essex area, Surrey. Every month of the year, I receive maybe at the least 2 sightings a month, at the most 4 sightings a month. And some of these are from far-flung places of the British Isles, you see.
Sure.
And of course, I can't travel out there, but we got quite an extensive sort of team. So we got people living in Dorset and other places where we can pass that on to if they're in the area, and they can go out and investigate it. See, this sort of thing.
I know you and I sort of overlap in our views on what the black cats are. I mean, I know you feel some of them have to be black leopards by their nature and cause, whenever, but a lot of them aren't. And I'm the other way around. I feel the majority of the ones reported to me, people are describing something like a melanistic leopard. But I think I also agree with you that some of them are not. Not that you can always go 100% by a witness report, but the interesting thing, looking at the footage of Corin's cat that we talked about earlier, and I've looked at that with you and many other people, it doesn't look like, it's a dark cat, it doesn't look like a puma or a leopard. And the big, large black one that Sharon Larkin photographed on the Scottish borders, again, it's not an obvious black leopard. It does look more like a sort of a mutant, large domestic cat.
And that's what people say.
Yeah, so there is that puzzle about it.
It's hard to believe, actually. A lot of people are saying that. He suggests, like in Australia, I think that's the theory over there in many cases, these are just feral domestic cats that have got bigger and bigger and bigger. So
there's giganticism there for some mutation or whatever.
I mean, why suddenly, you know? I've come across a domestic cat, a dead, big, black tom cat, and I picked it up on the road, and it's as big as a fox. It's as big as a fox, but it's just a big, massive black tomcat, this was. So it shows you that domestic cats can reach the size of a fox. And I think a lot of people may be seeing some of these big cats, fox-sized domestic cats, and they go, wow, look at that. But one strange thing about which conflicts with your theory is that
the black ones are mainly melanistic black leopards.
That's what you're saying. But what I'm saying is that when I speak to people, if they see one in daylight, close up, I say to them, did you see its eyes? And they say, no, I didn't see eyes, right. But if they do, I say, oh yeah, what did it look like, its eyes? Oh, it's just like a domestic cat's eyes. Well, can you explain yourself? Yes, they were yellow, mostly yellow or green, yellow, most of them. And they got this vertical pupil. Now, only small...
Felis,
the small cat species, have got this. Domestic cats, jungle cats, and all the other small species, domestic cats, have got this vertical pupil. So in bright sunlight, as you look at your domestic cat, you can see its eye. It'll go to a vertical pupil. Whereas you look at a big cat in a zoo, lion, tiger, leopard, in bright sunlight, the pupil will retract to a small black dot. So the people are saying to me, in my mind, it's saying, okay, we got a big cat, but it's got the features in its eyes of a small cat, a domestic cat.
Not a panthera.
No, not a panthera. It's until we actually got a specimen in front of us, and I can assure you specimens have been taken away, but we never know about them. Maybe to protect the public, I don't know, whatever. But we all know amongst our group that there have been examples taken away and never disclosed. But until we have one of these, and it's analysed and diagnosed what it is, you know, we can never be 100% certain. But the other interesting fact as well is that it seems to be a midway cat in coloration. We often get chocolate brown cats in the same vicinity as the black and the fawn ones. Now, would this be a cross between the two, fawn and black, produce chocolate brown? I don't know how it works.
Or a light-coloured melanistic leopard or a dark-coloured puma.
That's right. Yeah. But one thing I must say, which is really rather puzzling in a way, although everyone comes up with some story to sort of some judgment on it, which tries to override it, and that is, we get so many black leopards. The most common leopard in the world is the spotted leopard. So surely people would have bought spotted leopards years ago And there were spotted leopards. I think I've only ever come across 2 reports of a spotted leopard in this country being seen. And why don't we get any spotted leopards? It's rather strange.
I suppose part of the answer to that would be if there was a founder population of black ones, 2 black parents breed on black, and incidentally 2 black jaguars will breed on only 75% black. That 25% will be the normal coloration of a jaguar. So you would get a consistent black population like you of black leopards, like you do have in dominant. Yeah,
it'd be dominant.
But yeah, sure. Could we just quickly touch on lynx, Frank? Because about 10% of the reports are pretty consistently lynx, and fascinating.
Yeah, lynx. Apparently, lynx are one of the most secretive of all the wild cat species. One of the most secretive, more so than leopards. Leopards, after a while, they become pretty audacious and quite sort of daring, going into Indian villages, taking a set of dogs and cats and such like. Whereas lynx are secretive.
Some of the most remarkable reports you've had. Yeah,
as you know, Rick, you I think you went to Poland or somewhere, was it? Slovakia?
I've been on field trips to learn about lynx. Yeah,
and you spoke to trackers over there who've been tracking them for 3 or 4 years or so. They've never ever seen a lynx.
Well, I mean, there was one guy he had to intercept them with foothold traps, humane foothold traps to collar them. So he would see them regularly. But I said to him, and this was a 7-year stint he'd had at this. I said, other than that, how often have you seen a lynx? And you're right in the heart of their territory. He said, 3 glimpses in 7 years.
There you are.
And he's right by them all the time.
Yeah, they know you're there. I mean, they can hear you. Hearing's the highest sense in a cat, not smell at all. Smell's quite it's got a lower sense in a cat as opposed to dogs, wolves, and bears. So the sense of smell is not as good as we try to make out in cats. It's the hearing and the sight, which is higher senses. I've had 2 reports that come to mind, and this is one was from Coombe Hill area on the way to Cheltenham, and the guy was a gardener, and he had a couple of cold frames, and he said he'd come out one morning about 6 in the morning, and it's just warming up. He said there was a lynx laying across his cold frame because of the heat. He couldn't believe it, and he described it intently, just like a lynx. He described accurately like a lynx. He said it jumped up, saw him. It was just as surprised as him. Jumped up and ran off.
Just like a domestic cat would rest on a warm compost heap or on a sunny part in
sunny
the
part of the garden. Yeah, and like your domestic cat would, and it just took off. And the other one was a manager some many years ago of Tesco's in Quedgeley, but it was quite a smallish Tesco then at the time. And he rang me up. He said, I saw a lynx. I said, well, where'd you see the lynx? He said, in Tesco's. I said, in Tesco's. Come on. So he said, no, not in Tesco's, but in Tesco's car park. I said, yeah, what happened? He said, well, we had 2 big wheelie bins, he said. I think they changed now, but all the sort of out-of-date food they used to put in the bins in those days. I don't think they're allowed to do it now, whatever. But they used to put all the out-of-date stuff in these bins. And he said he come out one morning, just opened the back doors, and there's a lynx scavenging, looking around the bins. He just ran off.
Attracted by the meaty smell.
Yeah,
yes. I think other people have had that kind of report elsewhere in the country.
Yeah. And this is a way to attract. The other thing about tracking, you see, I mean, there's only 2 really professional type, really good trackers in the world. I mean, I've learned to track through. I'm not much good at tracking. I'm all right. I'm okay. I'm better than Joe Public. But you compare me with a professional tracker, I wouldn't stand a chance. But it's nice to learn as you go along, and you learn every day. And the only 2 ones are a military tracker and your indigenous peoples of the world tracking. Because both of them, their tracking of animals and people depend on their lives. With the military, it depends on their lives, the lives of their comrades. So they've got to be expert trackers. And secondly, the indigenous people, they need to track for food. Otherwise, they'd starve. Because they kill the animals for their food. So they have to rely on tracking. Lots of people purport to be trackers. But when you actually meet them, they're quite laughable, really. I had a report from guys at Cotswold dry stone waller. And he was up, I think this is
Mid-South Cotswolds.
Mid-South Cotswolds, somewhere around there. And he was doing this building or repairing, I think it was, this Cotswold stone wall. And all of a sudden, he happened to see this animal leaping up in the air like this. And he looked across, and it was a lynx. And he said, we described it quite accurately as a lynx. It was after pheasants. It was leaping, trying to catch these pheasants, which lynx do. Caracals do it, especially the African lynx. And they jump really high, and you see them. They pull birds out of the sky.
Yes.
So it's a feature of lynx to actually leap up and try to grab birds.
Yeah.
He didn't know this, so he's just reporting what he saw. But once again, isn't it interesting to see that he reported what he saw, but the behaviour of what he saw correlates actually to a proper lynx behaviour.
Yes.
So it shows you how genuine that report was. You see.
Yeah. I mean, I remember had a report from Scotland of one bounding over logs going for grouse, which again is what they would do. In the nature.
Yeah.
And
but of course,
rabbits and hares are other key prey for them, aren't they?
That's
but also they're described as
they take down roe deer as well.
Yeah, the little cat with a big attitude. They could get something much larger.
Oh, they do.
Technique.
Yeah. Oh, they do. I mean, they see what people don't realise when they see a cat. Look at, for instance, leopards are pulled down much larger prey. All cats will, because they've got the tools for the job. They got the biting power. They got the long stabbing canines, and they got the claws to hold on. You see, but most of just like leopards, you see, for instance, in this country, I think what's happened. Well, we say leopards, big cats.
Leopard-like
big cats,
yeah.
and puma-like big cats in this country. There's no doubt about it now. I mean, with so many sightings from reputable people like police, gamekeepers, and we've had groups of people seeing them, not just one or two groups, 3 or 4 people seeing them. These big cats are here to stay, and it's not a question of danger. They're not dangerous towards people. I haven't known one. All wild animals, they want to stay away from man, wouldn't you? Noisy cars, dogs barking, shouting, screaming, radios playing. You don't want to mess with that. You just want to stay away from it all the time.
On that one, I know you and I and others don't like to be alarmist, and bringing up examples of where people have been sort of followed and it's been a bit close for comfort can be unrepresentative, highly unrepresentative, because it's once every 2 years we'll get a report like that. Yeah. But could you relay briefly the report of Jean, it was in Painswick?
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
when she was followed. That's a fascinating one.
I think in many of these cases, I think it's the small dog that the cat is after, or that is causing it a problem. It's another predator in there, and it either wants to get rid of that dog or cat, or maybe I don't think basically it wants to kill it for prey. I think it's just saying, get out. You're another predator. Just stay away.
You're bothersome.
Yeah. It may in cold weather try and get the small dog.
But can you describe that one, Frank?
She rang me up and she said she was in Painswick going through the woods, and this is another unusual one as well because of the sound. And she said she had a little small Cayenne Terrier, I think it was, a little small terrier. And she always went up in the woods on her own. And she was walking through this area, which is like a disused...
It was a woodland gully, wasn't it?
Gully,
she was in the
almost like you call a wadi. And it's full of leaves. And she was walking along there, and she suddenly looked up, and she was a big black cat behind a tree looking at her, and she couldn't believe it. And she's frightened, she's terrified. And the dog sensed it, she said. And the dog went rigid, she said, with fear. And suddenly the cat made this noise, a wailing sort of noise. She said it sounded like a plane in distress. Started off high, like it sort of went sort of... like a plane when they do a dive in an air show or something like this. And she said she was terrified. And she shouted out at the top of her voice, "Help me! Anyone here? I've got a big black cat, big black puma or leopard like following me. I'm terrified. Help me." No one was up there, of course. It's on her own. And she gradually walked her way back to her. The dog shut the drag, it all was rigid. She picked the dog up. And the dog was so frightened it peed itself. So she made her way, and it's following her. When she stopped, the cat stopped and watched her behind a tree. When she walked, it followed her. It was almost like stalking her. I think it was, like I said, the dog. Anyway, it kept making this sound. She got to this stile which took her out of the wood towards the main road, and the cat was still following her. And then suddenly a lorry came up, and as on a bend, he had to put his air brakes on, which sort of go, lorry's air brakes made that sort of noise. And the noise frightened the cat, and the cat ran off. And so we relayed that story, went in the press, went on television, went everywhere, because it's such a dramatic and descriptive story.
I remember she contacted me as well, and yourself, and said she needed to stay in touch for almost sort of to get over the traumatised sort of experience. And she used to go there several times a week to collect wood, and she didn't ever go back.
No. Many people say that. If they say it, I wouldn't go back there again on my own, you see.
And the key thing she wanted from us was to try and influence the owners to put up an information sign, because she just didn't want... And she emphasised she didn't want any harm coming to a cat if it was ever discovered there, but she was worried about kids playing there.
Yeah, that's right. Many of them say that, you see. I've had so many tales of big cats being seen near schools. Just happened to be in the location. What it is, much of this, you see, over the years, has been, as we all know, there's so much building going on, so much land being bought up by building companies.
We're bound to encroach where they are sometimes.
And they're building up. What you've got to remember is all animals got territories. All animals got territories. And they defend the territories against others of the same species. And, of course, they got regular trails. They've been maybe hundreds of years, badgers especially, hundreds of years using these trails from A to B. Of course, we build over there, regardless, and they're not going to suddenly give up their trails. They'll find a way around it, or they go through late at night when no one's around. And this is why people see them more, you see. I think, basically, people are seeing cats more now over the last 10 years due to expansion of building business parks and leisure areas where people go more, and people are going out much more than they did years ago. Another example which I found quite interesting was a mountain biker in the Forest of Dean, and he rang me up. He said he goes mountain biking all through the trails in the forest, and he said he come round this bend near Colford, dead quiet it was, and he was going quite fast on the bike. He said all of a sudden, sat 20, 30 yards, 40 yards ahead of him was a big black leopard-like cat. He's big black. He said washing itself in the sunlight. He said he's terrible. He braked. The bike went sideways. He come off the bike, got up. He said it just casually looked at him and continued washing itself like a domestic cat. I said, what did you do? He said, well, what did you do? He said, I just jumped on the bike and went back and away I come. So an experience like that, you see, is quite amazing. And it is quite daunting. I mean, it would be for anyone.
Yes.
I defy anyone to say they come round the corner. There was a soldier some years ago, I think he was ex-Special Forces, Marines. I think it was Marines he was. He obviously fought in Iraq and that, and the soldiers are supposed to be quite brave most of the time, so he put up with all these rigours and danger, etc. And he was walking back home, I believe it was through the forest somewhere, and he come face to face with a big black cat, and he turned around, he ran.
Something you're not trained for.
And he ran into a pub, I think, afterwards, at a pub, and he was crying with the fear of it all. This big cat.
You just haven't been prepared for that.
No, stuff like that. I get all these tales and stories, you see.
Frank, we're on our last 2 or 3 minutes, and one thing you touched on tracking, and a good element of tracking is looking for scat, looking for droppings.
That's right. Yeah.
Could you just give us an example of when you find a suspect dropping, what you do, and how you make a sort of assessment of it?
Yeah. Well, first thing about tracking, it's not so much. Well, it is obviously it's a tracking, looking for impressions in the ground made by animals and big cats, what we're looking for. But it's also being observant. That's the main thing. A lot of people can go out and look and walk through a wood and see nothing at all. You've got birds out, they don't see anything because they're not observant. You've got to observe. You've got to have a knack for observing stuff and not missing anything. And this is where you find stuff like that. And you have to look in places like pinch points, and you find where animal trails. A good place, obviously, to start. You've got to, if you find water and you find cover and you find rabbits, pheasants, and prey, you know there's going to be a carnivore there of some sort. You see, and if you find droppings, foxes are quite easy to analyse. You see, they're generally up to about 6 inches long maximum, and they got this terrible smell. Once you smelt it, you never forget it. This fox smell. I expect many of you listening mostly found fox poo on your lawn or your patio, and you know what it's when you clear it up. And it's generally got a little twist on the end. And if it's a wild fox, you generally got hair, which is down the axis of it, all the way down on top of it. If it's the urban foxes, it's generally just like normal dog poo. It's quite runny, but it's still got that smell to it. But anyway, and if you come across, the way I'm looking at it is that generally, if it's a big cat dropping, it's generally like a line of like sausages, 3 or 4 joined together. Like Segmented.
Yeah.
All the way down there. So. And generally it's got, we are what we eat. So it's generally got fur in it, feathers in it. And what I tend to do, if I find something on which I think, hello, this is something different, okay, I take it back, I put it in an old dish, and I put some hot water in it and leave it overnight, and it breaks up. And now I can see exactly what's in it. You find small bones, small mammals, mice, rabbit bones in it, and all sorts, and hair and feathers. So it's quite interesting, was it? But the only way, of course, as you know, Rick, is to send it away for DNA analysis.
And for those wondering about that, I mean, we have done that about 6 times in the last 2-3 years, and by and large, it comes back. The result, DNA result test, comes back as something in the content of the dropping. So roe deer. It's clearly wasn't a roe deer's dropping, but that's the predominant content. So that's the result you get. And I know even from the American experience, because I go to the mountain lion conferences in the States, and some of their labs, they ask each other, the practitioners over there ask each other, what are the best labs for getting good results from scat? It is difficult to get a result from scat sometimes.
Yes, that's what I've heard, actually. And also I read...
But the key thing is that the thing that you're doing about investigating the content, that is really helpful to get, because it's giving you a clue about the diet, the lifestyle, what it's eating, basically, in its life.
But they say that trackers in Tibet and round there, where you've got snow leopards, and you also got wolves as well. And because they both eat the same diet, even the professional trackers find it hard to identify between the droppings, because they eat the same stuff. It comes out very similar, you see. The content is what determines what comes out the other end.
Yeah, and the smell. What about the smell? Because you reckon a cat one smells...
Yeah, the cat one smells quite metallic sort of smell, or just like iodine. Well, imagine you've got a domestic cat, a cat tray, when you clean out your cat litter, that sort of smell. And it stands out quite well, that does, you see. And the cat pee smells like that. It's terrible. Yeah. And one way to do it, if you think there's one, is to go up a tree.
That's Frank's phone going off, by the way, and that's my fault, not for saying turn your phone off before we start.
I'll turn it off. Of course, what they will do, cats, you see, and this has been, I was talking about, not a nice subject, I know, but it's all part and parcel of the natural world, and you have to go through all of it if you're determined, if you're that interested in it. It's the droppings and the urine. In many cases, I've come across people have rung me up and said they've seen a big cat backing up to a tree, lifting its tail up like tomcats do, and peeing against the tree, a stream of urine coming out. And of course, obviously the tree smells then. So sometimes if you know the cat's in the area, if you can get that smell, you can go up and have a sniff of the tree, see what you think. And if you think it's okay, it's going to come back there again because it's marking its territory, and that is the place to put one of our 24/7 trail cameras up there. And hopefully it come back. But I think myself personally, there must be thousands of these 24/7 trail cameras in the UK now, and we haven't got really
10 out of 10 footage. We've got some glimpses.
We've got some glimpses, but we haven't got the real McCoy footage.
Yeah, although we're aware there are some. I mean, I've seen some as well.
Yeah, but a lot of them, you see, I think they're so wary that they know the camera's there. We know that because it makes a click when it takes. They just avoid it. And once they know it's there, they never go back there because they think it's a trap. The main thing about wild animals is to be aware of mankind and being trapped. If they think it's a trap, they won't go back there. So we've got to be very clever how we set our cameras up to get them, you see. Putting them up higher in a tree, because most wild animals don't look up. Conceal them in a log or something like this, And we've done all this, but anyway, hey-ho, we might get...
We've got to finish now, Frank, but the final point I'd finish on is that this balance that you and others have in terms of trying to sort of acclimatise people in your work and what you do to the fact that cats are around, but you're also quite aware of the fact that bringing evidence very emphatically could be a sort of Pandora's box situation, and
That's right.
it's that striking that balance, isn't it? Because you wouldn't want everybody to start panicking overnight if you sort of had 6 DNA test results with leopards and pumas all over the place, and no context for explaining that.
No.
So you go at it carefully, don't you?
Oh yeah, you have to, because I mean the first thing people ask me, the press, when they speak to me, because they obviously want to sensationalise things, they will say to me, "Are they dangerous?" in that sort of voice. I said no, and they say it about anyone. Are they dangerous? Even badgers. Someone had a badger in their garden in Gloucester here, and they got in touch with me. He's got a badger in my garden. I said, "Well, it's all right. Is it dangerous? Will it attack me?" I said, "Well, no, if you leave it alone, of course it won't attack you." So any wild animal who's got teeth and claws to them would be dangerous, you see. They're not dangerous at all. But the whole point about it is you have to, like you said, balance it up with people. Of course, there's big cats all the time. But of course, if suddenly in the press tomorrow, we got it, there's 10 photos across the UK of big cats. They've got to be out there, guys. Don't worry. People say, "Oh my goodness, big cats out there. I've got to lock my kids away. I'm not going to let my little toddler play in the garden," and this sort of thing. "I'm not going to let my dog go in the woods anymore." And you're going to get that. And panic will ensue. I mean, people have only got to say, "Oh yeah, bakery's going on strike. There'll be a bread strike." The shelves are cleared in Asda in 10 minutes of bread. I mean,
The overreaction to
everything, and it's
sure.
always overreaction to everything. This sort of thing.
So it's keeping it in proportion is what you and others are trying to do in bringing it to people's attention.
When I look at the moment in the Forest of Dean, you've got signs up there. Be aware, there's wild boar in the area. They can be dangerous. Keep your dogs on a lead and your child close.
And don't feed them.
And don't feed them. This sort of thing. And that's just wild boar.
Yeah.
Imagine if they put a sign up saying the same about big cats out there. People wouldn't go in there, would they?
Yeah, we'll be discussing those kinds of issues as we go through the series of these podcasts. So, Frank, thank you so much. I think we're going to have to wrap it up there because we've gone over our allocation, but it's been tremendous hearing from you. You'll no doubt be part of the series, and we'll hear from you again at various times in the future. And what I would say to people who are in and around Gloucestershire, if you want to come to a talk, that Frank and I do talks, and sometimes we do the talks together, and they're often almost like sort of fireside chats. We like to sort of chats and tales around the campfire, so in with the community and local people talking about their big cat sightings themselves, and that always really helps. So the next one that we're scheduled for is 17th of October at Nymphsfield. So if you want to get in touch on any aspect of the podcast or details of that event, please email me. Remember, you can look on the website to get the past episodes and look at any further information. Coming episodes, one of the key forthcoming episodes will feature sheep farmers' experiences and the impacts on sheep and how those sheep farmers feel about it. And of course, that's a very important aspect of this subject that we need to consider in the podcast series. So thanks everyone for listening. Thanks again, Frank. Great to hear from you. And see you next time, and take care.